Thank you very much. It's exciting to see so many people here interested in the future of veterinary education. What I will share with you today is a little bit of my perspective. It's one perspective. It's not the only perspective. So I hope to talk for about 45 minutes. And then I would really encourage a free exchange of ideas and what you are all doing related to e-education. I also want to thank the organizers for their generous invitation to speak here. This is my second visit to Japan and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. This is very much a collaborative presentation from a team at the University of Illinois, including Dr. James Lowe, Brian Aldrich, and Larry Firkins. We are, I would say, because I'm the Dean of the College of Veterinary Medicine, we're at the forefront of e-learning in the United States. But even if I wasn't Dean, I would still say that because we've got a long history in successfully applying e-learning principles, and I'll share some of those examples with you. Obviously, one of the big challenges that has not been talked much about at this meeting, that by 2050 or 2060, if we have to feed 9 billion people, there's an interesting concept that at that stage we're going to have to produce the same amount of food in the next 40 years than we've produced in the last 10,000 years. Now there's many ways that we're going to be able to have to do to achieve that goal. So what will it take to feed 9 billion people? Well, obviously we're going to have to be more efficient about everything that we do, but an important component of that is knowledge transfer. So there's a whole lot of current information, knowledge that we can apply right now, and then we're going to have to develop new technology to go ahead and get along to improve our knowledge transfer, and then ultimately being able to feed the 9 billion. So where are we with education right now? Because there is no doubt this is a transformational age in education. And I will say that the digital era that we're in right now, in 50 or 100 years, people will look back and say that this is as transformational as was Gutenberg's printing press was in the 1600s. That it changed the whole landscape about how education is delivered and how people learn. As part of that, we're right in this cusp of this transformation right now. And there's this change in emphasis on the continuous learning. The pace of change is so rapid that even 5 to 10 years after we attain a terminal degree, in some fields our knowledge is outdated. So the focus really has to be on training people how to learn and how to continually learn for the rest of their career. And this leads to skills in lifelong, personalized and flexible education. So this is a time of disruptive change, and that's driven primarily by the digital era with digital computing and associated software. This has led to the internet and World Wide Web. I just want to cast your minds back to 1993. So that's about 25 years ago. Nobody would have realized in 1993 that libraries would become obsolete. Nobody anticipated that. That watches would become obsolete. That everyone in the world would have a cell phone and would be using that as their primary means of accessing information. What that also means is that in the past, we used to value knowledge and the ability to retain and regurgitate knowledge. So if you remember when you went to high school or primary school, the smartest kid in the class was the one with the encyclopedic knowledge that could tell you what the capital of Albania was and which rivers ran north of Moscow. So that encyclopedic knowledge now is no longer valued because we can, with our personal access through cell phones, we can get a variety of what we need to interpret as accurate information within 5 or 30 seconds. So this is really a transformational change. The other thing is the knowledge is decaying at a very quick rate. So in some areas it's static. In other areas it is changing so quickly that it's even difficult for academics who have time to follow it to stay current, and that's one of the reasons that we keep coming to great conferences such as the World Buiatrics Congress. Part of this is driven by the tremendous advance and lowering of cost of the access of digital material. You've seen this type of graph in many different forms, but in this version, it's calculations per second for $1,000. So this is indexing a little bit to the cost. So this is not only including the speed of computing and how it is getting faster, but how the cost of that computing speed is getting lowered. And you'll see that we're going to reach a very interesting point right now because our speed of calculations effectively is at the equivalent of a mouse brain. If you follow this logical conclusion up here, we're going to get into artificial neural networks and artificial intelligence because very soon the speed of computing will be at the speed of the human brain. So there will be a lot more change going on even in the next 10 years, many of which we can't anticipate. So we've got to stay very current and be very skillful in the digital arena. So I thought if you're going to talk about e-learning, we need to define or at least introduce you to some terms. There's not a lot of consensus on all of these terms, but this was my interpretation of what the current consensus is. The old style of education that we all did where we sat in a desk and there was a teacher up at the front of the room with the blackboard, that's now getting called face-to-face education. And because we're interested in abbreviation, everything is getting faster, shorter, and we might call that F2F. You'll start to see that being used. So from a university perspective, this is a traditional on-campus instruction in a conventional brick and mortar classroom. So very much like this, I'm up on the stage, you're here, we've got a brick classroom around us. So distance education has been around for a long time. It's been around for longer than many of us have actually really thought about it, but it's now been rapidly evolving. And its definition is teaching and planned learning, so not accidental learning, but planned learning, in which teaching normally occurs in a different place from learning. So there's a separation, a physical separation, and it requires communication through a number of technologies as well as specific institutional organization to make that happen. So some of the formats of distance education, if you look at the history of this, it probably started in the late 1700s to early 1800s, where you could get coursework delivered through the mail. We might think that that's a more recent thing, but it actually goes back to the late 1700s. More recent examples about this is lessons or learning given through different methods of transmission. And a good example about this, as you can tell from my accent, I'm a blend of a number of countries right now, but I grew up in Australia. But in Australia, they had a school of the air. There's almost the size of Western Europe in Australia with less than 50,000 people. And one of the challenges was in post-World War II is how do you educate these people that cannot get access to a nearest school. Their nearest neighbor might be 40 kilometers away, so really there's no chance that they can commute to school. So one of the examples in Australia is that they taught lessons by radio. So they would have the classroom set here in Alice Springs, and then during the day, people would sit around the radio and they would listen to the lessons, they would do some homework and quizzes and send them in. So that's one of the first early examples about broadcasting and conferencing. We did many of those when we were growing up. I can remember in the 70s, I watched television in Australia and learnt how to fold origami, which is very relevant since we're here in Japan, the home of origami. So there was tremendous lessons on how do you fold origami, and the TV was a great example of doing that. So this has now evolved into two things that we're going to talk quite a bit about, online and web-based learning. We're going to talk more about and provide examples. And then what are called MOOCs, which are massive open online courses, which our College of Veterinary Medicine has quite a bit of experience with. Then another terminology that you'll hear a lot is what's called blended learning. And blended is a mixture of face-to-face education and distance education of varying amounts. It might be an 80%, 20% blend, or it might be a 20%, 80% blend. So the preferred term right now is blended learning. You might also see that called mixed mode or hybrid learning. So that's this mixture of face-to-face distant education. There is no doubt that is going to be a dominant educational platform in veterinary medicine even in the next 2 years. We're doing it already at the University of Illinois. What needs to be discussed is what is the optimal blend and what things can be blended so that work really well from a distance perspective, and then maybe what else needs to be done face-to-face. If you look at the evolution of these terms, just to give you some idea about the rapidity, here is a search on use of these terms in titles of papers published in peer-reviewed journals. And you'll see that some names become popular and then decline a little bit, and some come from nowhere to become the dominant terminology, which is e-learning right here. So this is still so rapidly evolving. There's still going to be some debate about what is the exact terminology and what is the definition. There's also quite a bit of controversy right now about how successful is distance education. How do you evaluate success? It's actually challenging in learning to do that. But the meta-analyses that have been done out of this are sort of consistent as to what appears right now to be determinants of success. The first one is the type of student. So that student needs to be what we call a digital native. It needs to be reflexive for them that they know how to operate in a digital era. So for instance, I was amazed when my 3-year-old daughter a few years ago, the first thing that she did when she saw a screen was she put a finger on it and moved her hand around so that the screen would change over or something else. So already they were digital natives, and that wasn't innate for me when I was growing up. Also, the literature's pretty consistent on this, is that the students that are more successful with distance education are postgraduate professional students, veterinarians with a veterinary degree, fits this category perfectly. That is the best group that has the best success with distant education. They are superior to graduate and undergraduate students. And it might be because they've already gone through a lot of experiential learning. Now they're out in the real world applying their knowledge that they have, and they're very motivated because they see that there's a module or an area that they want to gain additional skills in. Let me just put one out there, antimicrobial stewardship for food-producing animals. They might want to gain greater skills in that area. They recognize that's a deficiency in their current education, and they're willing to apply themselves to do this on a distance education. They're motivated to do that. You've got to have the adequate technology. Early on, when I was fortunate enough to travel around the world, you go to some countries, and the internet was so slow that there was not possible that you could ever do any reasonable learning on it. The frustration factor would get so high as you could see the pictures loading up essentially line by line. So having really effective equipment that doesn't fail and that is appropriate speed is also being shown to be a very key point. And the institution has to be very active in providing support for that. The instructional materials have to be of exceptional quality. The digital natives are very, very critical of quality of anything. They're the YouTube generation. They like high quality video. So if you're going to get into this field, you have to invest a lot in making high quality videos. I'll give you some examples of that. The mode of course delivery. Well, the data says that it's got to be flexible. So this was why we're starting to get at these modules, which is a group of subjects that you put together. Then you can stack these and maybe ultimately get multiple certificates that could lead to a degree. For post-DVM professional students, asynchronous seems to work very well. So you are working at your pace. It might be impossible for you to do this on a Monday and a Tuesday because of family commitments or work commitments, but you can block out time on Sunday to do this. So asynchronous works very much better than synchronous or in the classroom. And then the types of interactions. People are defining this as student to student, which is an extremely important part of the undergraduate face-to-face traditional bricks and mortar university experience, because there's a lot of learning that goes on, a lot of social understanding, a lot of soft skill learning of communications, of exposure to new ideas that goes on with that student-to-student interaction. There's the interaction of the student with the content, and then interaction between the student and the instructor. And then how do you professionally package this? This is, at the University of Illinois, we've become very, very skillful at doing this. It's very much like how do you construct a magnificent situational comedy on television. There's a particular style to it, and it becomes very formulaic, but that's what we're used to, and it's successful. So here's a very good extensive reference on distance learning if you're interested in reading a lot more on this topic. So what does e-learning do, and what is the veterinary profession doing? And in fact, this is where education is in the US right now. We're transforming from an instructed-centered, so this is what they call the sage on the stage. So this is, no, I'll be fine, I'm going back. But it's, you know, you're performing. You're meant to be doing a great performance at every lecture. So it takes that and turns it around so it's now student-centered. So you out there are deciding what you want to learn at your speed and in what manner you get the material and from where. So you choose what to learn, when to learn, and who to learn with. Some of you love working in teams. Some of you hate doing that because it just slows you down. So it's very individualized as to what is the best model for you. But talking to students that are doing this, and we have quite a few in our College of Veterinary Medicine that are doing a combined DVM Masters of Public Health degree, and quite a bit of the MPH is online, is that you've got to be very self-directed and self-motivated to stay on schedule, because it's very easy to get behind when you don't have to get up at 6:30 to get to class at 8 o'clock and to study for this quiz. There's none of that sort of imposed structure on there when you start going on to e-learning. So you have to be personally very committed to staying on task. And then the instructor here is meant to be a nurturing, supporting, guiding role, and rather than the person who says that this is the way it is. So what are the advantages with e-learning? Well, it's flexible. You can get a lot more students through your class, so you might enroll 250 but only have classrooms that could have 150. So that's attractive, so that should decrease the cost of education. For the areas of education that are for-profit, then they like it because it potentially increases profit per student. Disadvantages. You've got to have good technology, both to provide the material, and the student has to be very comfortable with technology. Students can feel isolated. They can't really get a chance to talk through things, so there has to be a mechanism for them to be able to connect to other students. There is a cost to training instructors to this modality, which is different modality to what our other modalities are. And then to build the team to deliver this material, which includes videographers, and we'll get into those details, there's quite a bit of cost associated with that. So this is currently getting to this concept that we're talking about right now, which is it's now a learning community. So we're not students and teachers, we're a learning community, and we're on this journey together. So we've got learners, we've got facilitators that help that learning, and then we've also got instructors. So I'll just give you now, after that introduction, some examples about what we're doing at the University of Illinois. Again, I'm not saying this is the correct way of doing it. These are examples of how we're doing it. I think some of these things that we're doing here are awesome, and I think that they're going to be a critical part of anyone else's program that you're doing. I think there's other things that we think right now are awesome that we'll find out are really the wrong direction to go. But this is where we are at the moment. So we went through a very extensive strategic planning process at the University of Illinois, very bottom up, and our faculty were passionate about providing transformative learning experiences. So our faculty said we want to be preeminent as a source for online veterinary education, including the delivery of postgraduate certificates, open online courses, both veterinary and non-veterinary. And then we need to look at this interaction between teacher and learner, the educational community, and we've got to promote efficiency in that area. And then we wanted to position our college as being the premier source for veterinary medical education, not only for the veterinary profession but elsewhere. And then we're looking at doing this in a number of arenas right here. So I'm the dean of the college. I serve for the faculty. This is what the faculty were telling me that the dean, as dean, the college needed to do. So we're putting resources into this. So to give you a little bit of history, because it's needed to give you a full understanding about why we took the approach that we did. We developed a program we called the Executive Veterinary Program in 1991 to address what we felt was an important unmet need in postgraduate education for veterinarians. And we focused this initially on swine industry, and as I'll share with you, we've branched out since then into small animal and most recently into beef cattle. So that we originally focused on the swine industry, but we were really trying to give people more skills about what is the industry about and what are the real drivers for production and efficiency from a very big picture perspective, including national, international markets. So at the moment, we have 222 swine veterinarians in the US and Canada that have gone through this. This is more than half of all swine practitioners in North America, and we presently have provided most of the leadership for the American Association of Swine Veterinarians and Practitioners of the Year. So the people that are interested in these experiences are your leaders and are your thought leaders and change agents. So just to give you an example, the current class that just finished a 2-year course on this, and this is the class right here. These 40 people were responsible for 40% of the pigs marketed in the US and 70% of the genetics. And there were also people there taking this course from all the pharmaceutical companies. So this was a wonderful networking opportunity, but also to get advanced skills. Okay. And then, as I mentioned, we've briefly expanded that into beef. And that's a relationship between Illinois and Kansas State University, and that program is about to conclude up in Chicago in a few months. So just to give you a very quick example about what one of these programs might look like from a beef perspective, and the reason I'm talking about this is in the future some of this is going to be not given face-to-face. So some of this will be given online. But an important component of this program is the networking opportunities to meet with other leaders from other areas of the country, meet with industry people, and make contacts. So this really needs to be getting into this mixed hybrid blended model. So these courses, you meet for 2 full days, 2.5 days, over a weekend, 10 times over 18 months. So each one of those meetings would, the first one would look at clinical reasoning. Next one is disease occurrence and detection, effective therapeutics, so you can get into pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, residue times, how do you assess efficacy, how do you evaluate economics, practicality of treatment, all of those issues. Production records, leadership, which is a very important part of being a successful veterinarian, particularly if you're in the consultancy field. How do you change people's attitudes? How do you get a dysfunctional team to work better and more efficiently? So there's a lot of soft skills in there that we need to attain to be successful. And then you can get into specific issues related to vaccines that can help lifelong learning with interpreting all the great presentations we've had here about new vaccine with the new dosage sort of protocol, and how to interpret that so you become an expert in adjuvants and what is cell-mediated immunity and what's the best way to evaluate that. Data analysis. On these big farms, it's going to become more and more important that we're analyzing data in real time and using that to inform decisions. Nutrition's obviously a major problem, and then systems basis, and then understanding your customer. So we are finishing up this beef module meeting with some of the chief executive officers of McDonald's, the major producer of hamburgers in the world. We want to know what they're thinking and what they're expecting from the beef industry to meet their needs. So another example, and that was a classic face-to-face program that is going to go into a blended model the next time we do it. E-learning is an example of a totally online course that we are the leaders in delivering in the US. So this was produced by one of our senior and very well-known veterinarians who founded the dental college as a dental specialty in the US, boarded in both dentistry and surgery, and it focused on modern dentistry techniques for dogs and cats, 24 hours of material with different modules. So we originally developed this for us, University of Illinois, but we're entrepreneurial, so we felt that there might be an interest elsewhere. So it has varied over the years, but you can see in 2016 right here that we had 24 universities. At the moment, we have 27 universities, so we have more than half of the universities in North America and quite a few leading colleges of veterinary medicine from around the world. Their students take this course, and at some of them, this is the only dentistry that they can get. And this type of example will become a lot more common at colleges of veterinary medicine. They're going to say, we can't afford to have an expert in aquaculture. If we have students that are really interested in aquaculture, take this online course from this College of Veterinary Medicine that has serious expertise in aquaculture. And then you'll get a certificate about that and added skills. We've totaled right now over 10,000 student participants. Historically, they've been given a PDF file that they can download, and then with a lot of instructional material that's asynchronous, they go at their space. And then we don't charge that much for this course because it's really given at scale. So some colleges grant credit for this course. We do the exams. It's really not that much work because a lot of it's computerized and already been validated. And then others give a certificate of completion. And then I'll give you an example. We're just about to finish a digital imaging course under the same strategy. We are changing the way we give notes to what's called e-text, which is a much more easily way to search. So these will be complementing any other notes that the students get. This has been developed primarily at Illinois, so different institutions might have their own version of that. MOOCs, these massively open online courses. I wanted to spend some time on this. So this is one of the first revolutions in online delivery because these are free. These are great courses given by the experts in the area that you can just go ahead and do for free. Now, if you want to get a certificate of completion and you feel that the marketplace will value that, then you can pay some money to get that certificate of completion. Most people doing MOOCs don't do that. They just do it for themselves so that they can get some personal confidence that they've now mastered a certain particular area. So, at least from the North American perspective, the two big ones were founded either at Stanford in California and a blend of Harvard, MIT in Massachusetts. They were both founded at the same time. University of Illinois is probably the major university player in this space. We've got a very disruptive online MBA program that has really changed the market for that. If you want to look at this course, here is the download number right here, and just see what's available there for veterinary. If you just look at some screen grabs as to what's on there, and there's not a lot of veterinary courses right now, but you can see some examples. So the University of Edinburgh has been playing in this space for some time. Here's one that was one of the first ones developed by a colleague of mine, who's now a emeritus professor, Walt Hurley, has done one on lactation biology. That's an outstanding course, but it's all production animals, not only cattle, but sheep, goats, pigs, and a little bit on horses. Then the one I want to talk a little bit about is one that Dr. Aldrich and Dr. Lowe developed, which is a tremendous MOOC called Sustainable Food Production Through Livestock Management. So why do a MOOC? Well, it's self-directed and individualized. You can do group work and get feedback from other students. It's flexible, adaptable, and low cost. So here is an introduction to this MOOC.
My name's Dr. Brian Aldrich from the University of Illinois College of Veterinary Medicine. I'm a livestock veterinarian here at the university, and I'm one of the instructors on the course, which is looking at sustainable food production through livestock management.
So I'm Jim Lowe, and we're standing here today in the middle of this oat field. And you ask, why are we standing in an oat field? Isn't this a class about animal agriculture and sustainability? Well, as we think about animal ag and we think about how do we feed the world, these oats that I'm standing in and all their other plant brethren are really where it all starts.
During this course, we'll be looking at different aspects of livestock management, how animals deal with nutrients, how they grow, and also how we can develop systems which can optimize their health by good management practices. So we're here today, and if you noticed, it's cold, it's snowing. It's about freezing, about 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees centigrade. And we're looking at how these calves cope with those kind of conditions. And as you can see, this animal is showing great behavior. It's a jumping and fun-filled calf. Why? Because its management is optimized to cope with the environment that it's in. Its nutrition is optimized to feed it all of the nutrients it needs to cope with the changing weather.
We've talked about sustainability. We've talked about why do we raise animals, and these really beautiful calves here standing next to us during their feeding period. But how do we assess the economics, and how do we manage a business and make a determination of how we make decisions in agriculture?
Livestock production systems around the world are completely different, so we're really interested in hearing from you in your country and in your particular environment as to how animals are kept, and some of the management systems that have been developed to see how you and other people that you know have used management systems to optimize livestock production so that healthy food is produced from those animals.
We're limited by the amount of land we have and the total land mass we've got. So how do we use our one and greatest limiting resource, which is land, in a manner that produces the most good for the most people over the longest period of time? Thank you, and we look forward to the rest of the course.
All right, so that's an example, and some of that was a little bit jerkiness because of the way the computers operate right here, which gets into the technology. But you get a sense that there's a rhythm about the cuts, about the visuals that are all storyboarded right there. The animals are all very engaging. You're trying to get drawn in. So to be successful with this material, you've got to deliver it at that type of level. So this MOOC had about 6 total weeks. You can see here some of the things that they were focusing on. It was focused for a very broad audience, not just veterinarians, but veterinary students, people thinking about being veterinary students, farmers around the world. And then there were multiple reading resources, videos, practice exercises, discussion forums, quizzes. And then if you wanted to have a certificate to put on your resume and put on the wall, you could purchase that, or you could just finish it and feel good about that yourself. So there were discussion boards where you would have discussions with students that were doing that at the same time. And then in the digital era, you can capture online what is happening. So here's just a snapshot. At one point, there were 10,303 learners had joined. You can look at how many hours were spent on the course. You can get some comments and feedback. So the big advantage with these MOOCs is that they're massive. You can reach a large audience at low cost. So the way MOOCs are going is this was very revolutionary when they came in about 4 years ago. And as people have worked with them and learned about them, the idea is that this is an entrance to potentially some other online material that you will provide. And this is probably given away free. And then people, if they enjoy this and value this, then they might be interested in taking on some modules that you will charge a price for. So just to give you an idea about the impact of this course, as of earlier this year, 25,000 learners from 165 countries have looked at this. A third of them are from emerging economies. 9,000 at least completed a substantial part of the course. Not that many are interested in certificates. So this looks like what's happening with MOOCs is that it's going to be a way of drawing in a smaller group of people that might be interested in more detailed material. Okay. And most of the feedback was productive. So I've been fortunate enough to have seen agriculture in multiple countries around the world, and I think there is a need for materials that can give core concepts, best practices that are adaptable to many production systems around the world, as long as they've got broadband technology and can actually access the material. I think this will be a wonderful advance. Okay. So where we are going with this is that this is getting into this constant concept of stackable credentials. So that, for instance, I think this is on the next thing right here. So if you're a DVM student and you want to differentiate yourself in the marketplace, what about if you take one of these online modules and certificates, let's say in nutrition of the transition dairy cow. So if you have a skill set in that and you've got a lot more understanding about ketosis and monitoring and dry matter intake and evaluation and NEFAs and a whole lot of other things, then that will be of value. All right, so this has led to our development of an iLearning Center at the University of Illinois. And to give you some idea of the resource, we've got Dr. Jim Lowe is the director of that. But you need to develop this teaching community, learning community, if you like. So we've got a full-time medical illustrator. We've got administrative staff that are focusing on copyright issues, because the moment you're utilizing material and then selling it at cost, you've got to get copyright clearance for all of that. We need a specialist videographer, instructional designer, and producer that storyboards all of these materials. Some of the way that this is done is captured on a blue screen.
Typically, in a healthy animal, you don't actually see the airway itself. You just see the potential space of where it lives. So that's in the periphery of the airway. So lobar bronchi, you can see here, The other spot in the cranial lung lobes that you can see vasculature and bronchi are in through here.
So that's an example
We
right
can
there.
see,
Then
we
here's
have a look
another
up
one.
in the neck, you can see the trachea, or the trachea. This is the windpipe here, with those cartilaginous rings that we described, that really maintain the tubular structure of the chest. And you can see this is the jugular vein, which is blue and runs in.
So then you can also utilize other material that it's in other colleges on campus. So if we're going to do quite a bit of learning about partial budgeting, enterprise costs, why don't we just use existing material over in the College of Business? Some of it might need to be tailored, others might be very, very ready to go to just transform. So this gets to some of these where you mix and match from taking all the different skill sets. You could go to the College of Agriculture and get some ag engineering material about how best to construct buildings to optimize ventilation. So this is where the big universities are going to go. They're going to be putting these courses together but utilizing all the great talent at the university. Now, what we're currently doing is we're looking at taking this type of resource allocation that we're developing and also using that material in our current DVM curriculum. And this gets into the flipped classroom. And the flipped classroom is that the students prepare for the lecture, and it's not on paper, they actually do have to prepare. So they have to read material or hopefully look at online material before the class. And then the class is a much more active interchange of ideas and problem solving. So you can use this material in multiple ways, not just for online. You can use it as part of your face-to-face, if you like. So the flipped MOOC, if you like, is what Dr. Aldrich is currently doing at the University of Illinois. The classic face-to-face is you might watch a video, interact with discussion boards and take quiz, so that would be the MOOC. But when you do blended learning, students can watch the video synchronously or asynchronously, but let's say you're going to do it tonight for the lecture tomorrow. And then during the class, there's a lot of interaction and class discussion. The idea here is to have students more engaged, and a more engaged student leads to better retention. Okay. So the things that we're looking for is to really develop a spectrum of offerings. Initially, some of them will be free, non-credit, and then others will be the online Masters of Science programs. We think that the materials can be used for multiple types of this, so they're repurposed, repackaged. We use other material from campus. So first off, I've talked about MOOCs that are freely accessible. We're going to do a blended executive veterinary program that right now is 10 long weekends away. That's probably going to go to 5 long weekends away and 5 other activities that are going to be done online. So what is that balance that needs to be determined? I think there'll be more and more need for these courses that students at different institutions around the world will be interested in taking for their own portfolio, for their interest, because that's what they think they need to be competitive. So we've already got the one on dentistry. We're just finishing one up on diagnostic imaging. Right. And then there'll be a whole other mixture of other online materials to 1-hour courses, particularly aimed at postgraduate veterinarians. Okay. And then the ultimate would be to take an online master's degree that is valued in the industry. So that ends up that you command more income or a more interesting job because you've taken these additional credentials. So in sort of summary right here, iLearning I don't think is going to replace textbooks, but the textbook publishers are still having extensive discussions about how best to play in this space. Already most of these textbooks are available electronically as electronic textbooks. So I was fortunate enough to take over as senior author on veterinary medicine. That first came out in 1960. It is the most heavily cited textbook in veterinary medicine. So I don't think that this book is going to go away, but it's going to change because it's probably going to have aspects of it that can be downloaded to an app. And then people can really focus on diagnosis and treatment on the little app in a little box. And then for more details, they can either go to the book as an electronic book or have the hard copy. I do need to let you know that this is not something that is in the future. It's available right now. I'm one of the editors of about 8 of the MOOC Veterinary Manual, so I'm representing quite a bit of the ruminant part of the MOOC Veterinary Manual. And since October last year, that entire book is available free online for anyone in the world. And they're very aggressive about expanding the content in this book with more images and videos that help the learning of the students. So I think this is where publishers are looking at in the future. They're looking at textbooks that can be used as a textbook, but also parts of it can be used online. Have a look at the MOOC Veterinary Manual right now. It's really an indication of the way things are futuring. So I don't think iLearning is going to replace what I call walking around knowledge. So I expect every graduate veterinarian working with cattle to know what the normal rectal temperature and heart rate is for a cow. That's walking around knowledge. They can't just go ahead and Google that. And then there's a lot of experiential learning that we need to do related to the mastery of technical skills. I'll just give you some examples right here. Surgery. I don't think that we can teach quite a bit of surgery online. We can teach some. You can teach aseptic technique, the principles of it. You can give a little bit of an idea about suture degradation and suture selection and so on. But actually, how do you tie a knot is really an experiential learning. It's one of the reasons veterinary medicine is an expensive course to deliver. So I think some of those courses are going to go into blended programs. So, learning how to do knots. You really need to have the rope in your hand and someone checking out that you're doing that efficiently. But I think they're going to move more and more to these blended instructional approaches. Okay. The other challenge, the reason why we can't go totally online is that there's increasing importance on soft skills. So these are communication skills, how to read clients, how to read body language, being empathetic. And then one that's really important to us in the US right now is a term that we're using, resiliency. So we want the students to be able to face adversity and triumph because we're all going to go through adversity in both our professional and personal careers. We need to actually develop the skill set that allow us to be resilient and to bounce back from those setbacks. So there's still this great need for face-to-face interaction and discussion on cases. So I'm not saying that we're going to replace all of the face-to-face interaction, but we're going to be doing more blended right here. So with that, I've just gone a couple of minutes over. So I'd like to thank you for your attention. Here are our email lists if you'd like to contact any of us about that, and I'd like to turn it back over to the chairperson. So thank you very much.